Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and it has been a big reading week with lots of random things being read. We're going to kick it off with Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by deGrasse Tyson, which is a non-fiction book about space and astrophysics, so astronomy, and I love that sort of stuff. This one I had out as an audiobook, so I was listening to it while I was doing some housework and bits and pieces, and it was just really cool. It was a nice complement to sort of the book that I read earlier in the year, The First Astronomers, which was around Australia's First Nations people's knowledge around astronomy. So this was just really interesting to sort of add to all of that. And yeah, it covered a lot of topics, but it's not a really long book, so it's very easy to listen to. And there was a great quote, and I wrote it down because it was at the start of the book, and it said, "The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you." And I liked it just, well, it just resonated with me, but also, you know, we live in such a vast, amazing universe, and there is so much that we don't know. And that's kind of exciting, scary, but also exciting. And yeah, I just enjoy coming back to books like this, and I'm glad that there are very accessible astronomy and astrophysics texts out there, because you know, you get some fun facts that you can share with people. I also read Bright Objects by Ruby Todd. Again, this was another audiobook. This is a book that came out from Allen and Unwin, I'm pretty sure, a couple of months ago, and I'd seen it and I almost requested it, but I wasn't sure about it. So anyway, I saw it in my library's collection and I'm like, okay, fine, we're gonna listen to it. And this is about Sylvie, whose husband has died. He was killed in a car accident, and the driver of the other car just disappeared and never owned up to it. And since then she has started working at a local funeral home, and she's thinking of ending her own life. All of this is happening around the arrival of a comet that has just been discovered and supposedly only comes around, you know, once in, you know, many thousands of years. At the same time, she meets this guy called Theo who comes into the funeral home, and he happens to be the person who discovered this comet. And as sort of the small town in Australia that she lives in is preparing for the arrival of this comet, you begin to see how people react. And of course, people have very different reactions to something like this, a big celestial sort of moment. It really becomes a bit of a, not quite a thriller, but a mystery with some thrilling aspects to it, because there is another gentleman in town who essentially starts up a cult, and Sylvie and some of the people around her get caught up in it. And all of this is happening around Sylvie's thoughts about her husband's death, around the fact that the person driving the other car was never found. She has suspicions about who it is, and she is determined to uncover that they're the person who is responsible, but maybe she is not super clear on who that is. And then there's a big reveal at the end, and oh my gosh, it was just so interesting. I mean, I do love a book with a bit of a cult happening, and yeah, the audio was great. The story was really great. It was nice that it was an Australian book. Yeah, just a really different kind of story, one that I haven't read in a while, so that was fun. Then I read A Stealthy Situation by Saxon James. This is from the Franklin University Series 2. It's book 2 in the series, but they're all interconnected standalones, so you can read them in whatever order that you like because they're by different authors. And this one is the story of Harrison and Benny. Benny is one of the younger brothers of the Dalton siblings from the CU hockey series. So I love the Dalton family, and so it was nice to sort of come back and revisit Benny, who is one half of a set of twins. And this is kind of a bit of an opposites attract kind of story. So Harrison is doing his master's in agriculture. He is a plants guy, which we love plants. And he ends up meeting Benny in a stats class, except the Benny that he meets in the stats class is kind of different to the Benny that he hangs out with outside of class. And as we find out, Benny and his twin brother have been swapping places because Benny really struggles with maths. And as it turns out throughout the course of the book, he's diagnosed with dyscalculia. And it was never picked up early enough because he and his brother have their entire life been swapping classes because no one can tell them apart. Even their older siblings really struggle to work out which one is which, and they have to use physical signifiers sometimes. And yeah, so it's their relationship and falling for one another, and then of course dealing with the fallout when Harrison realizes that Benny has a twin, because on campus they've kept it a secret because they've been swapping classes. So it was a really fun, just short, enjoyable story, as Saxon James's books always are. And then I also went back and read the first book by Saxon James in the Franklin University series, which is from series 1, and that was The Dating Disaster. And that was kind of fun because the two main characters of this book are the roommates of Harrison in A Stealthy Situation, so it was nice to sort of get that backstory. So we have Marshall and Felix, and this is kind of a situation where you have ace representation, and Marshall and Felix end up on a date together at the start of the book, but it doesn't go well. And then the next thing they know, they're being introduced as new potential roommates, which makes things a little bit awkward. But it's about how they have a couple more opportunities to try that date again and discover that maybe the reason the first date didn't go so well is because they have different expectations of what a first date is going to look like when one person is ace and the other just really enjoys having sex. So it's about them sort of working their way up to understanding each other and finding the things they have in common and what it is that they appreciate and like about one another, set at college. Those were fun and quick and easy reads. Then Evie Mitchell's new book, Kink in the Road, came out. This is a novella-length story. It's book 1 in the Men of Trinity Bay series. And the premise of this is that all of the characters live on this small island where the men significantly outnumber the women, and so much to the extent that the town has legalized polygamy and polyamorous marriages, which wouldn't that be nice if that was everywhere? The story is told from the perspective of the female protagonist. Her name is Riley. She works as the local mechanic, and everyone kind of just sees her as one of the guys or as the little sister, and it means she never gets to find a date and she's feeling a little bit down about that. Meanwhile, the local mayor, who is a bit of a matchmaker, has decided to set up like a singles weekend to try and liven things up on the island, and Riley is roped into helping out 2 of her friends, Aiden and Finn, who run the local bar. And Riley has been harboring a crush on both of them. Aiden and Finn are in a committed relationship, but what she doesn't realize is that they are also interested in her, and they see that this whole singles weekend thing is kind of getting her down, and they make a go of a relationship together, which was really fun. It's Evie Mitchell. It's super steamy. It's very fun. It's very lighthearted and just enjoyable. I also read Alpha Love a Friend by Dria Andersen, which is a paranormal black love story. It is about Demi, whose mother has passed away, and so she's come home to her hometown, and she is being supported by her best friend Marco. And Marco is the pack leader for the local lion shifter pack and has been in love with Demi for the longest time. It's a fated mate story, so basically the fated mates bond kicks in, and it's the perfect time for them. They're both a little bit older, they both understand each other, they know the risks inherent with starting a friends to lovers relationship, and it was just a really fun short read. Like, it was just really enjoyable, and I needed that this week. And sometimes you just need shorter reads to break up the longer ones. Then I read probably my favourite book of the week. It's called Of the Wild by Wambheim, and this one is a book that's been sitting on my Kindle for the longest time. It is a queer paranormal / fantasy romance-ish story. We're entirely in the perspective of a character called Eris, who is a magic creature of the forest, and he goes around and he kidnaps children. This is going to sound so dodgy. He kidnaps children from families who mistreat them, so they're children who are unwanted or unloved and who are being hurt by the places where they're living. And so it's kind of like that, like a Peter Pan story, where he takes them back and he helps raise them, and they have free run of this magical forest that he's the caretaker of. And as the children grow up and become accepted by the magic of the forest, they all grow like magical features. So some of them have wings, some of them have feathers, some of them have claws, and they all suit their personality, and they're the most delightful little bunch. Like, this is the book, if you liked The House on the Cerulean Sea but you want something a little bit shorter, or a lot shorter than that, this is a great one to come to. You kind of get those feelings because we get to know quite a few of these children. There's a lot of them, so we don't get to know all of them, but we get to know quite a few of them in detail. And one of the things that Eris does is he cares for these children. They're his kids until they are ready to return to the human world. And when they do, they sort of shed all of their magical features, and then they slowly disappear. And when they go back to the human world, they go to families who will love and care for them the way that they deserve to be treated, which anyway, but as it turns out, Eris is dying and the magic is starting to fade, and he needs to find someone who can take over caring for the children. And in walks William, who is a human who has no idea of this world, just happens to turn up in a dream one day, and Eris recognizes that he has the potential to be someone who could take over the magic. So William slowly begins to return day after day. He himself is sort of a lost soul, just like the children, and he begins to learn of the magic and what Eris does, and has to make a decision about whether or not he can take over in that way. Meanwhile, there's a little bit of other stuff going on in the world, in that there are these shadow walkers who are threatening the forest, and while we don't get as much information on them, the story itself is not about that. That's an external conflict that's adding pressure to the fact that Eris's magic is fading. But yeah, it's William and Eris's story, and it is, as I said, it's a queer story, so there is you know, threads of a love story in there, but it's definitely not an explicit on-page story. Eris is ace, and so it's a very quiet, very lovely little story that happens to have magic and paranormal elements and things like that. So would I have loved a longer book with more world building? Absolutely, but at the same time, I think this book is just really lovely on its own. All right, and then the last book that I read this week was Us Against You by Fredrick Backman. You would have seen in my previous vlog, I'll leave it linked on the screen, that I recently read Beartown. Absolutely loved it. That book was, for all the hard-hitting topics that it hit, it was incredible, and Us Against You follows on from that, in that Beartown is still reeling from the events of the first book. There was a sexual assault that happened on page, and then the town basically went on a witch hunt, and the victim blaming and everything that happened was just wow. But in Us Against You, it's about 6 months later, and the Beartown Ice Hockey Club is under threat. There's a new politician in town who is just god-awful and the epitome of every politician that you hate, because he's manipulating everything in the background. All of our characters are trying to find their place post everything that happened, which means relationships are under stress. Secrets are revealed about characters that were previously hidden. This book, while also still dealing with the fallout from the sexual assault, the victim blaming, and the fall from grace of their star hockey player, now also has to contend with another player being outed as gay and the homophobia that comes with that. You also have a pack of people that everyone insists there is no pack, but there is a pack of people who will do anything to keep the status quo in the hockey club. There is arson, there is a car accident, there is all sorts of things that happen here. There is youth violence, and all of it happens because you're in a small town where things get heated and people just don't know what to do. And you have two towns that are intense rivals who are coming back at each other for the first time in 6 months. And things get complicated and messy, and it is intense, and it is so well written. I don't think I can explain it and do it justice enough. It's one of those books that I think you kind of just have to read. And if you're at all interested in small towns and the effect that a small town's intense focus on sport or any kind of shared cultural focus, this is a series to check out, because it is really, really well written. And I was pleasantly surprised by how Fredrick Backman handled all of the topics across both books. And I've got book 3 that I'm going to try and read sometime in the near future, because I'm fully invested in this town. All right, and that is my wrap up for this week. So in the comments, feel free to let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you're planning on picking any of them up, or feel free to share a book that you have read and loved in the past week. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave any kind of tree emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye everyone.